Welcome back, folks. Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Thank you very much for joining me here. It's been a few days since I last mustered up the energy for one of these, and I've been feeling a little slower with every day that goes past, and I've been waiting for tomorrow, Friday, when I need to make a specific order from a specific place at a specific time. It's all very, I don't know, I just hope it's worth it. I'm going to be honest, I was a little deflated by the call that I made last time we were here. I went from this huge high of knowing that somebody else out there had my back to, it's not crushing disappointment, it's just disappointment because I expected more. I don't know. I just wanted someone to fix this. I was hoping that someone would be able to tell me what to do, but at the end of all of that, it's still on me. And I'm tired. I'm so tired. I searched through a few things from that call. I talked a little bit about it, and when I played it back, obviously you couldn't hear what was being said on the other end of the line. It was very crackled. It was all falling apart, but I made out the words Shry Diva and Scream Stealers. There was a lot of other words spoken there, but they were kind of swallowed by the static. Now, there's nothing online about Shry Diva. I went through a lot of different spellings. I'm really not sure how to get that out, but from what I've messed about, something like Scream Thief in German, which kind of lines up with Scream Stealers. I don't know. Either way, there's not much out there when I search or look into that. None of it is useful to me at all. I already know that they are kind of feeding on my misery. I kind of hope that putting a name to things or having some kind of sense of it would allow me to understand it more and find at least a fairy tale, but there's nothing useful, nothing helpful. I shouldn't sound down because that was more than I should have hoped for. There was so much more on the call, but it gave me more questions than answers. But they are questions that if I delved into it, I ever get the chance to ask them or search for it, I'm pretty sure I could get grounded answers. Like, why was there a time limit on the call? Why is there a time limit on the call that I have to make tomorrow? The caller at one point said it's creeping and rushed the call to end. Whether or not that's related to what I'm going through or something else, I don't know. Because from all the links that the firefighter was leaving everywhere, it feels like my problem is not the only one that they're dealing with. The caller did say they're spread thin. So we also know, from my attempts to leave Belfast, I said that I had theories on that. I don't want to share them just yet, about what I encountered when I was trying to leave. I know that there are other things out there. So I don't want to talk about that just yet. And it's not because I lack confidence in my theory, but it's going to have a really huge piece of this to start discussing. And I really want to talk about this before I get into whatever arrives tomorrow, whatever happens there, because what I want to do is I want to talk about this today and I want to get that out there, and then I want to go over all of my notes and put together where we're at. And once I've done that, I'll be in a position to hopefully accept whatever the caller has sent me and review it with that in mind. Because there's actually a problem right now that I have, which is the more I look into this, the bigger it becomes. And the bigger it gets, the further away from my immediate problems I get. And it doesn't mean that those things aren't relevant. It doesn't mean that they're not important. But it also feels like part of the trap. That when I scratch the surface, there's a hole. And it's so deep that I could spend all of my time delving into it before I realize that there's no way back. So I have to stay on target in dealing with my immediate problems. And where does that begin? Well, when I was at the port in Dublin, I mentioned that I recognized one of the stalkers. and I'd never seen them before in person, but the shape of their face was familiar. And nothing came to mind there and then, and it hasn't really kind of come back up until I started organizing my notes, and I realized who they were. Now, I was looking into breathing. The notes that I had, I go into a lot of depth there about what I'm dealing with right now, but also that first time in the bath where I saw whatever I saw. And it was that came to me where I'd seen the stalker before and in what context I had seen them before.
Man, I've been looking for a community of like-minded people who get that breathing is more than just air, but doesn't require me to learn a foreign language just to understand what the heck is going on.
Yeah, I get that. I was the same until I found MindFlow. It's not just another meditation app, it's a way of life. It's like yoga without all the bloat. Straightforward, powerful, and built on Western values.
So why am I sharing a terrible advert so full of dog whistles that it just set all the neighborhood balking? It is skeezy. I don't even know if the people are real people. Why am I sharing this? Why am I sharing this garbage? Well, that's where I know him from. He's not the speaker there, obviously, but the youngest stalker who I saw outside Dublin Port looked eerily familiar to me, but it was a very deep recognition, and it took a long time for me to place him. And it was only when I was reviewing the breathing that something clicked. The stalker was Harry Nolan. Now, you may know them, you may not know them, and I can't really use a fake name here because as I describe this, people are just going to know who it is if they know. So I can't hide them like I have for other people. But it doesn't really matter because, they've pretty much been scrubbed as an online presence. And for those of you who are fortunate enough to have avoided this guy, I'm going to give you a rundown now. So Nolan was a YouTuber from it was definitely pre-pandemic. I really should have looked into that more, but basically around 6-7 years ago, he went from top to toxic in, I wish I could say record time, but there's always somebody who's trying to break the world's biggest prick record, right? But he was awful, and he was always awful. And the content that made him famous was a prank series. It was just mean-spirited nonsense. It ruined people's days and laugh about it, pulling stunts that were really just more about humiliation than humor. And I remember there was one distinct one that I remember when people were sharing, look how big a bellend this moron is, and people were sharing them around. I remember one of the ones that I saw was he walked up to a guy with a girlfriend and just offered to buy her on the street. Just two people having a good day, and this jackass just wedged himself into their life in an attempt to make it worse for clicks. We are not talking highbrow rib ticklers here. It was all low effort, bottom of the barrel rudeness, like pretending to fall into people's dinner tables and then arguing about how it was the people who were just having a meal's fault for being there. It was in one of them where a dude took his phone away and just smashed it on the floor. There was big virality on that one because people love seeing him get his comeuppance. But of course, for him, it was just a massive wine fest, and he was aggrieved. He got consequences, and the kind of backlash he was getting was still attention. And because it was attention, it fed more into him being seen everywhere. He sucked. He absolutely sucked. Just the worst kind of pond life. And an absolute nightmare person that you never want to spend more than a second in the presence of. That's what I took away from his content. just the worst. But then there's the live stream that ended his career. And this is like, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into, and then he did this video and he did that, because this is the kind of person where scandals just kind of rack up like so much over time. I'm just going to get to the key point here. He set up a thing, the kind of stuff that you can find online everywhere. It was a live streamed prank on his girlfriend, but because most people don't have it astroturfed and algorithmically boosted to slam it into your eyeballs and poison your brain, you don't see most of it. But his was getting boosted as much as possible. And he was staging a prank, again, in the loosest sense of the word, where he was basically going to pretend to be having an affair. His girlfriend was going to walk in, catch him having an affair, and then she was going to freak out and he was going to run away and he was going to try and have her chase him. Basically, it's most basic. It's the best interpretation you can give of this utter shit is he was going to humiliate someone he claimed to love and record them being incredibly upset. And when she chased him outside or when she left or whatever happened, his little pack of hyena friends were going to drop a bucket of water on her head and then he was going to propose. And I guess that classes as romantic comedy, right? Well, it went absolutely horrifically and tragically wrong. She came home, she caught him. He had a big kind of moment of what? Trying to really make her as upset as possible. And she stormed outside she didn't follow him. She ran away. So she ran outside and his buddies, his little friends who were up above, chuckling away, went to just get the bucket over her, just to really, kind of sort it out. Awful shit. But the bucket didn't tip properly because they couldn't hold a bucket that size and they just dropped it straight down. And full of water, it just caved in the top of her head, shattered her vertebrae, and knocked the person who she was right out of her. Senseless, brutal, and completely ugly, and filmed live for just put out there for people to watch and enjoy. And so what's Nolan's response to this? What's the fella's response to this? The woman he loves is a bloody mess on the floor. And he runs outside and he drops to one knee and he says, babe, 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 10 times. And just before it cuts off, he says twice, that's not good content, bro. That's not good content. Now, she survived for around 6 months on life support before mercifully passing away with some kind of peace. Just an absolute nightmare for her family and for absolutely nothing. And you can imagine the fallout from that. People were up in arms about this guy. He was cancelled pretty much immediately. Nobody wanted anything to do with him. The sponsorship was gone. But his fans, the Nolan Nation, handled it with the kind of respect that you'd expect, the kind of dignity that you'd expect. They refused to believe it was real and set out to prove that by pranking the parents of the girlfriend when they show up at the hospital to prove that it was all fake. And they threw a bucket of water in the poor woman's sister's face. She was finishing work, she came out, and they threw a bucket of water in her face. Hauntingly appalling. Terrible. It makes your blood boil just thinking about it. And the horrible garbage that her family went through during all of this, it just stands in complete opposition to Nolan and his parents. So Nolan's parents, just a pair of rich assholes, old money types who just exist to generate wealth for themselves through venture capital and stock manipulation. And there's some relevancy to this, and I need to share it, but it also made me laugh out loud because one of their firms are called GF Capital. And the only discussion I can find anywhere is somebody saying it stands for Get Fuck Capital. And I don't know why, a childish part of me got a giggle out of that. And it may as well be an alien business that doesn't exist. It's as weird as anything that I'm dealing with in terms of how alien it is to a normal person's understanding of the world. That's the kind of business that they're in. And those parents would never allow their faces on camera. They never touched it, but it was their dollars that laid the groundwork for virality, because there was no way that this guy was going to be famous for his skill or his craft. This was all down to rich parents mega funding him to game the system and create a self-fulfilling prophecy. He's successful because the numbers say he's successful, so people believe he's successful. And much like how he built his career on a kind of on wealth and smoke and mirrors, he somehow, and well, we all know how he avoided the charges. He just avoided the charges because they had the best legal team money could buy. So a thing that would ruin the rest of us, not just socially, but as human beings, it would haunt us until the day we die, was completely brushed off because money talks. So after that, I don't want to call it a scandal. I think it's a tragedy. After this tragedy of his design, Nolan disappeared for a while. He took time off, heading to a retreat to work on himself, according to like the socials. And a year later, he resurfaced after finding a better way. And can you guess what he was promoting when he came back? Mind flow meditation. And because this isn't apparent like through audio, it's spelled in the dumbest way possible. It's mind flow, FLO, like flow rider. It's not like spelled flow, FLOW. Well, his comeback didn't go well, and that's what I remember him for. That's what I remember him for. It was that scandal that it never really blew up because his channel was taken down so quickly, but the sheer gall of this guy turning back up. And it was a friend of mine who turned me onto it just before it went away. A friend of mine said, "Have you seen this?" And he sent me a link, and I was like, "Seen what? What are you talking about?" And I clicked on it, and it blew me away. And this is what got it. This is why it was just pulled almost immediately. It just absolutely flabbergasted me that someone responsible for another person's death in such a horrific public way could pop back up a year later promoting a racist meditation app without a care in the world, just completely talking about the incredible mindfulness that comes from it was unbelievable. So that video went down pretty much straight away. It was removed pretty much straight away, and for damn good reason. And the world's full of noise like that now. It's stacked up so much over time. You know, it's those constant cycles of boom and bust for the worst people imaginable. And we're all strapped in, forced to watch it unfold again and again and again and again. And it's no wonder at that time, I mean, if this happened today, what would probably happen is they would just keep promoting the app. But back then, they scrubbed him from the internet. Everything related to him was taken offline. There was a lot of the old DMCAs going out. There was the right to removal laws were brought in to just drop everything they possibly could from the internet. He did do a final apology video promising the Nolan Nation that he would return. And thankfully, there was nothing after that. He was never seen again. And nobody cared, because without the buzz, without the funding, and without the algorithm, Nolan was completely without value as an artist and completely lacking in morality as he was as a human being. I don't give a shit to say it. Fuck that guy. But everybody else had forgotten him, but I recognized him. I think what helped me to recognize him was when I saw him and the other stalkers breathing in sync. And on some deep level, it must have put me in mind of the promotion that he did. And at the time, there was so much going on, I just simply could not connect it up until I was looking into my notes on breathing and understood what it was that I recognized, that was who I saw. And honestly, given how he looks now, that kind of degradation that it seems all of the stalkers experience, you know, the kind of lack of care, getting thin, looking incredibly malnourished. Unless you were a super fan of a failed YouTuber from 6 years ago whose presence had been kind of just sandblasted from the cultural consciousness, you're not going to know him. You know, everyone has pretty much forgotten about him, except for the carrion crows of the digital age, you know, the people who turn up after the fact, the drama content people, the amateur documentary types, the people who remember everything. And thankfully, they saved me a lot of time. I'll come to that in a moment, because there's a lot out there about Nolan, how he was an ignorant sociopath behind the scenes, about how the fancy cars he showed off were bought by his parents, not through personal success. Nothing that he would show off was something that he had earned himself. He was a bully. He was a moron with the kind of content that people love to hate watch. And for some reason, some people miss the irony, right? That people are watching this to say that this person sucks. And because there's a lot of numbers behind it, they're tricked into thinking that, oh, this is actually popular. So they side with the popular kids and become a super fan. Just ridiculous stuff. The way society works, and like we as like a species can sometimes just fall into these traps, is astounding, because it's so obvious, but it's easy to focus on that, right? Rather than the real victims, like his girlfriend's family, who were absolutely put through the ringer, facing crippling hospital bills, death threats. They eventually divorced, and there were rumors of a payoff to keep them silent there. You know, they're victims of this guy's almost pathological need to be loved. And I said at the top of this, like when I started talking about this, it's very easy for me to get distracted. It's easy to stray from the path. But the only thing that's relevant to me in my situation here is what happened after. By figuring that out, it can hold true for the other stalkers, right? And that is a huge piece of the puzzle. So from this, all routes lead to mind flow.
They say it's breathing like a Viking. Powerful, controlled, in sync with like-minded people across the world.
That's what I'm talking about. Like warriors before battle. I want to be mindful, but my manhood means so much to me, I don't want to dilute it. Finally, a way to look after my mental health without having to sacrifice my beliefs.
Yeah, and it's not just masculinity. Mindflow makes sure women are comfortable with their place too. It's a no judgment zone for us to be comfortable with traditional femininity. Finally,
with Mindflow, it's not just breathing, it's a destiny. One breath, one destiny. $1.99 for the first month to start your journey. Trust me, you won't look back.
So yeah, that's pretty skeezy, right? Like two robots talking to each other about an app where they can share their traditional values. Like, that's just not kind of, you may as well just say what they mean at that point. There's no point in hiding it. It's just gross and utterly ridiculous. But one breath, one destiny. What does that sound like? I first saw this thing when I was meditating. What if, and we've established, right, that all of this had begun before the meditation. So what if I tapped into the breath that I'd been taking when I was asleep while I was awake and meditating? What if I'd slipped into that breathing pattern without even knowing it, and somehow that had let me glimpse this, given me awareness of it? And in that hotel bathroom outside Dublin, with the terrible hag bashing on the door, where I found the same breaths, and it took me somewhere else, even if it was just in my mind, in a forest that doesn't exist, or rather, I'm sure it doesn't exist now, but it once did. So breathing, aligned breaths, and now an organization with an app dedicated to doing just that, and a firm physical connection that I can draw from them to me. Not a coincidence, no chance in hell. So thankfully, the drama content creators have saved me a lot of time and a lot of hassle in terms of the company behind the app and their leadership, as well as scandals and conspiracies. And Christ, these people, they pad out their videos so much, right? You don't need to make a 3-hour video about this with a whole bunch of talking about what you've eaten that day and things. You could literally just cut to the chase and focus in on it. But I kind of understand it. They have to do it that way, but it's annoying, right? It is annoying. So what I've done is, rather than focus on any one of these videos, I've built a profile from a number of sources and from the company's own words. One thing to know as well is their marketing is its own kind of horror. It is just, it's awful in the worst way possible. So bear that in mind. There's also a lot of videos that were taken down on this. The company are extremely litigious. So I've already shared a typical ad for the app, but let's hear from their CEO. Sax, short for Saxon, he doesn't use that for some reason. Who knows why? So it's Sax Gustafsson. And I'm sure with that name and with this app and being the CEO of a company, he's a completely normal dude. I can I just say, you would think that it would be very easy to get a recording of this guy, but I can't find one anywhere. Apparently he does talks at a lot of their kind of retreats and things, and the kind of thing where you've got the CEO on stage and everybody's whooping and cheering, but he's very self-conscious about how he sounds because he just can't public speak very well at all. It's all quite nervous. So the only thing I have here are just really bad recordings from the crowd. So I'm going to give you the text rather than a direct recording of this guy. So bear in mind, I may miss some of the nuance of what he's trying to say here. So this is from FlowCon, where they get together. All of the kind of super fans get together here, and he's on stage. He's pumped up, and he says, and I quote, "That's right, people. We're improving on inner peace. We're leveling that shit up. We've taken the East and we've fused it with the best of the West. This can heal you. This can make you rich. This can bring people together, the right people together, to change the world. Can I get an OB? Can I get an OD? One breath, one destiny. People on the left say OB. People on the right say OD. We're going to make your kids into goddamn superhuman Vikings. Nietzsche shit. So yeah, he fucking sucks, right? But just like those streamer kids, he's got financial backing. Big financial backing and a compliant media base who breathlessly repeat whatever nonsense he's saying, never once mentioning that they do that because of the cash he's got backing him up. He's an egotistical moron with a really bad case of big tech face. I mean, you know the type, kind of posed like a baby bird with arseholes for eyes, and any criticism that you give to his face would strike him dead like a fucking killing word. Inhuman in a way that's utterly repellent to most people, but somehow sucks in those who fall for the winner narrative. And that he's paid for the narrative does not matter. They like to be on the winning side, even if that turns them into losers, even if they lose everything. And many, many, many people have lost everything by dealing with Sax Gustafsson. So it's just another Nolan Nation on a different scale. It's another pattern within the patterns we're finding. And it's like this because it works. I'm sure of it. I'm sure that it's like this because it works. That process of pumping up something that would never, ever pass muster otherwise without this isn't a flaw. It's the actual model. Because before I go any deeper on this, here's something crazy. The app isn't successful. It's a scam that targets people, but it doesn't make bank. It doesn't generate massive revenue. It's an absolute tanking failure, but everyone involved pretends it isn't. And the true believers, just through the sheer power of refusing to accept it, prop it all up. And do you want to know who has lost the most money so far in boosting this and propping it up? It's a little company I mentioned before, a drum roll please, called GF Capital. So yeah, like all things, there's depth here. This is a cult, and it's a cult in the modern sense where idiots latch onto a personality or a brand and defend it to the death. But it's also a cult in the older sense, in the darker sense. So I talked about how we got here and how I was led here, but next I'm going to need to talk about what happened after and how Nolan descended to whatever he is now. I'm going to have to get into who the stalkers are. But right now, I need to step away again and I need to take some time. Those flies from Caveville, the flies that aren't flies, they are in the house now. Not many of them. Maybe one or two. And I've seen them crawling along the walls, over the ceiling. And I can get quite close to them before they fly away. They're not huge, but they're not small either. They're long and slug-like with that insectile chitin kind of patchy along them, more like growths than anything else. They have like these horrible leechy faces and too many legs. Dragonfly wings make a horrible buzzing sound, and I've looked all around the house, but I don't know where they came from. I've not been able to spot these things down, but they wait for me to get close. They've got no eyes, but I know they're watching me. And in those fat, swollen bellies, I can see that their fault are bursting with something. It's kind of like they want to inject something rather than extract blood like a mosquito would. But for now, I can't stay in this room. It's up on the roof. It's not moving, but I can't stay here until it's gone. I can't be in the same room as it. I'm not moving right now. I'm being very slow. I don't want to think. This is one thing before I leave here. I don't want to think about what happens. What happens when I sleep. And these things can crawl along my skin, and there's nothing I can do about it.